The 25 best comedy movies of the 2010s. The very nature of what defines a comedy film has changed in the last decade, as an ever-expanding definition of the genre has grown to include a wider variety of films. Some of these films have been legitimate award contenders, while others have been massive box office successes, and there remains others that have sparked passionate cult followings or critical rediscoveries. Instead of relying on the same group of actors to produce the same film over and over, this decade's comedies have introduced a ton of new voices and let master filmmakers exercise their passion for the medium. Narrowing down the decade's best comedies is no easy task, but these films represent the most impressive achievements in film this decade that are considered to be under the comedy banner. The goal of a good comedy is to make an audience laugh, but the best comedies can go deeper and develop great characters, make powerful statements, and create new worlds. Here are the top 25 best comedy films of the 2010s. 25. Drinking Buddies. Joe Swanberg and Jackie Johnson have formed a terrific cinematic partnership with their bitter, observational comedies, and Drinking Buddies is another impressive deep dive into couples and relationships. Jackie Johnson and Anna Kendrick star as a relatively happy couple considering marriage, but when they embark on a weekend getaway with another couple, played by Olivia Wilde and Ron Livingston, sparks fly between all four and everyone begins to question who they ended up with. Swanberg's methodical way of looking at the minor disagreements that cause major arguments is often hilarious, but all of these actions feel grounded and the film never deviates from its realism. As these characters get drunker, they fall victim to their pent-up desires and end up revealing more than they ever intended. Each character is flawed in their own way, and the film's inconclusive way of wrapping up who ends up with who makes for a meditative study about what a good relationship really is. 24. 7 Psychopaths between Colin Farrell, Sam Rockwell, Woody Harrelson, Christopher Walken, and Tom Waits. 7 Psychopaths features a great collection of actors that excel at playing offbeat, morally dubious characters, and this sordid tale of double-crossing criminals and how they serve as artistic inspiration gives each actor a chance to shine. Farrell's character Mark is a writer who desperately wants to write a screenplay, and his search for real psychopaths to fill out his pages introduces him to a variety of dangerous individuals, each of whom have their own quirks. While he is clearly heavily inspired by Quentin Tarantino with his long, eccentric monologues and pop culture references, writer-director Martin McDonagh establishes himself as a dynamic filmmaker who isn't confined by structure and constantly switches focus between characters. Harrelson is downright phenomenal as a ruthless gangster with a heart of gold, and Walken gives one of his best performances in years and avoids becoming a caricature of his past work. None of these characters are traditionally likable, but each has such a captivating screen presence and knack for disaster that it's impossible to look away from what mischief they get into next. 23. Moonrise Kingdom, 2012. Wes Anderson is without a doubt a filmmaker whose films are their own genre, and while Anderson is often criticized for having more style than substance, Moonrise Kingdom is a genuinely emotional tale that reverts to Anderson's coming-of-age film roots. Anderson's idiosyncratic style and blunt humor is fitting for this story, as it through the eyes of children that have a more idealized vision of reality. Sam, an orphan who runs away from his scout troop during summer camp, and Susie, a disillusioned daughter from a rich family, both possess an awareness of the world and contempt for others that is odd for their age. And while Anderson plays their escape from society for laughs, he is respectful of the pressures put upon children and how sincere they can be. Bruce Willis gives one of his best performances in years as a scout leader who leads the search for Sam, and seeing Willis command a group of adolescent boys on this search mission with his typical gruffness is often hilarious. Like many of Anderson's films, Moonrise Kingdom is framed around characters telling stories to each other, and in this case it takes the form of the hilariously earnest letters between Sam and Susie. 22. Midnight in Paris movie. While Woody Allen has continued to make one film every year, the past decade has seen a considerable decline in the quality of his work, as he often reverts to familiar formulas and relies on narcissistic characters. Thankfully, Midnight in Paris marked a return to form for Allen and gave him a chance to satirize the nature of nostalgia as a wistful writer. Owen Wilson travels back in time to 1920s Paris across the course of an extended vacation with his fiancée, Rachel McAdams. The period setting features many cameos from famous writers and figures from the 20s, and imagines the mythic figures of Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Pablo Picasso, and Josephine Baker as down-to-earth, humorous figures. It's understandable why Wilson's character G would want to escape from the materialism of current day and how his wealthy fiancée's possessiveness is draining, but G learns that nostalgia in of itself isn't a healthy way of living and that one should learn to find the things they appreciate about the present. Gorgeously shot and perceptive of Paris's historic roots, Midnight in Paris is a warm-spirited and fitting tribute to the past that finds grace in the history of writing 21. Frank While Michael Fassbender has delivered many brave and daring performances, he's never done something quite as absurd as Frank, in which he portrays a mysterious band leader who wears a papier-mâché head at all times. Frank is a complete oddball, but his interesting method of creating his own instruments, experimenting with different sounds, and desire to help others discover themselves ends up inspiring a cult-like following of musicians, including John Domhnall Gleeson, a down-on-his-luck songwriter who serves as an audience avatar as he becomes involved with Frank. Frank is keen to help John craft his own identity, but John can never completely buy the enigmatic nature of his new band, and ends up tearing the group apart as he calls on Frank to take off the mask and reveal his secrets. While it's often quite dark and deals with serious mental illness issues, Frank has such a goofy premise that even its heartfelt moments have a comedic edge to them. Featuring a great original song in I Love You All and some impressive production design, Frank is a wholly original and occasionally disturbing venture into insanity 20. Hunt for the Wilder People. Hunt for the Wilder People. This sprawling journey across the New Zealand frontier is equal parts road trip comedy and fairy tale, and Taika Waititi shows that he can find something human in the weirdest characters, and proves that being a crowd pleaser doesn't mean being generic. The highly entertaining story follows Ricky, Julian Dennison, a rebellious 13-year-old orphan that is adopted by the gruff stranger Heck, Sam Neola. Heck never wanted a child and only adopted Ricky due to the pleading of his wife, but both characters learn to live away from authority and embark on a cross-country adventure to escape the law and child protective services. Waititi crafts a perfect buddy duo, as Ricky's talkative, gregarious character couldn't be more different than the tough-skinned, grim Heck. However, the independent streak of both characters gives them something to bond over, and their mutual love for Heck's late wife gives them something to bond over. 19. The Big Sick, a semi-autobiographical tale from Kumail Nanjiani. The Big Sick turns the standard romantic comedy formula on its head when Kumail's future wife Emily Gordon, Zoe Kazan, suffers a serious illness and is placed in a medical coma to heal. This forces Kumail to form an unlikely relationship with Emily's parents, Holly Hunter and Rhea Romano, and the three of them struggle to find common ground as they navigate racial and generational gaps. While Kumail's struggles feel real and it's easy to empathize with him as he conflicts with his traditionalist parents, he's also willing to show how irresponsible he was and how Emily's absence took the meaning away from his life. There's enough chemistry early on between Kumail and Emily that their separation feels all the more drastic, and Kumail is able to get sagely advice from Rhea Romano as he waxes poetic about his own failed marriage. Kumail's pursuit of stand-up comedy brings a lot of fresh material to the film, but also serves as a clever framing device for Kumail to express himself. 18. Submarine. Compared to other teenage sex comedies, Submarine presents a wholly unglamorous view of growing up, reveling in the most awkward moments of explaining and understanding intimacy. Oliver, as portrayed by Craig Roberts, only understands the world through checking things off lists and looking for rational solutions, and he's unable to connect with others as a result. Oliver's strained grasp of human behavior is challenged as he attempts to mend all the relationships in his life, including a romantic encounter with his crush Jordana and a botched attempt to save his parents' failed marriage. Roberts gives Oliver a blunt, dead-eyed stare that contributes greatly to the straightforward nature of the film's comedy, and despite his seemingly pensive thoughts, Oliver finds that it often takes drastic action to provoke emotions within others. Despite the obvious humor of seeing Oliver's plans go horribly awry, Submarine has a lot of wisdom and is oddly meditative. On growing up, ending with a gorgeous beach backdrop that ends the film in picturesque fashion. 17. The Lego Movie. While at first it seemed like nothing more than an extended advertisement for Lego products, the Lego Movie proved to be an out-of-the-box creative experiment that satirized everything from the hero's journey mythology to the dangers of group thinking. More than just being an argument in favor of creativity, the Lego Movie presents its message of collaboration through the creative framing device of a father and son acting out a story. With its colorful, expansive universe that mashes up characters and situations from a variety of different genres and intellectual properties, the film overloads the senses with in-jokes, references, and hidden gags, but they never distract from its surprisingly heartfelt story of a reluctant hero who is taken outside his comfort zone. 16. Dolomite Is My Name. Screenwriters Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski have proven time and time again with films like Ed Wood, Man on the Moon, and The People vs. Larry Flynt that they can turn the most outrageous real-life figures into inspirational characters that exemplify movements of change and freedom of expression. With Rudy Ray Moore, Eddie Murphy gives the best performance since his string of success in the 80s, and no matter what field Ray Moore is in, be it comedy records, stand-up performances, or his outrageous films, he breaks the mold and is unapologetically himself. The excellent costume design from Ruth Carter gives each character a flashy personality, and the brilliant score from Scott Palmer incorporates themes from the real Dolomite films in order to best exemplify the time and era. Dolomite Is My Name shows the chaotic frenzy of what a film set is like, yet reminds that out of the chaos a real classic can emerge. 15. The Death of Stalin. The Death of Stalin, a pitch-black satire of the inner workings of the Russian regime following the death of Joseph Stalin. The Death of Stalin shines a spotlight on the incompetence of those in power. It's hilarious to see how all these yes men came to be in positions of influence and where they are once their beloved leader leaves them behind. Yet filmmaker Armando Iannucci also shows the real danger that this quirky cast of characters present to common people and how competing ambitions always lead to collateral damage. Steve Buscemi gives one of his best performances as Nikita Khrushchev, the seemingly harmless head of the Moscow government who deceives his way into more power, and in one of the film's funniest scenes Buscemi must pass along a document to another character during Stalin's funeral by pretending to engage in a ceremonial practice. While it's ultimately a chilling reminder about the equally scary and inept forces at play at the top of a dictatorship, The Death of Stalin is so sharply written that it transcends the genre of political satire. 14. Popstar, Never Stop Never Stopping. Popstar Never Stop Never Stopping. Criminally underrated, Popstar, Never Stop Never Stopping is a searing satire of the excess and influence of pop singers, seen through the eyes of the buffoonish connoisseur, Andy Samberg, a former boy band star who abandoned his old friends to pursue a solo career. Samberg's performance is over the top, particularly in the amount of personal information he gives through social media, but it's an oddly accurate depiction of how much stake fans put in the lives of celebrities and how unlimited access to someone's private life can be destructive. Best of all, the soundtrack is filled with some genuinely great songs from The Lonely Island, and while the music has ridiculous lyrics that parody the self-seriousness of pop songs and their recurring themes, they are genuinely catchy and do a good job at exploring the characters and their lack of self-awareness. The mockumentary style allows for a lot of fun appearances by well-known performers in side roles, with a particularly effective appearance from veteran Lonely Island collaborator Michael Bolton used to strengthen the film's closing. Number 13. Logan Lucky. While there are a lot of comparisons to be made with Steven Soderbergh's previous heist film Ocean's 11, Logan Lucky is a distinct entity, and uses its empathy for the blue-collar protagonist to be both funny and endearing. Channing Tatum, Adam Driver, and Riley Keough play working-class siblings who all feel disenfranchised in their own ways from the fast-paced world around them, and their goal to rob the Texas Motor Speedway during the height of a NASCAR race isn't just a bid for survival, but a means of using old-fashioned skills to pull a con on the rich and pretentious. In a transformative performance as the veteran criminal Joe Bang, Daniel Craig sheds his James Bond performance and commits to his role as a hammy goofball masquerading as a master criminal. Soderbergh brings his signature methodical process to bring this heist to life, but it's the standout performance that makes these first-time characters worth rooting for. 21 Jump Street. 21 Jump Street, another reboot of an old television show, seemed completely cynical and unnecessary, but thankfully 21 Jump Street became a film that mocked its own existence and parodied the unoriginality of Hollywood. The premise of putting two undercover cops back into high school to bust a drug ring is completely ridiculous, and the film frequently makes fun of the fact that there's no conceivable way that Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill could convincingly go undercover. The two actors have surprisingly great chemistry, and Tatum and Hill are able to make their relationship an homage to both John Hughes' high school movies and outrageous buddy cop action films. There's a lot of heart that comes from seeing these two characters try to relive their youth through their undercover personas, and 21 Jump Street doesn't rely on any previous knowledge of the show, although Johnny Depp's appearance at the end is ranked among the decade's best cameos. 11. Jojo Rabbit. In the fashion of classics like Life is Beautiful or The Great Dictator, Taika Waititi's coming-of-age drama defines a way of reconciling with the horrors of the Holocaust in a comedic fashion. What's important is that it is from a child's perspective. Johannes Betzlow, Roman Griffin Davis, nicknamed Jojo because of his sweet nature, is just a young boy who lacks the capacity to understand the events that surround him, but it's his exposure to the realities of war and his friends that are affected by it that force him to grow up. Much of the comedy comes from Jojo's interaction with an imaginary friend version of Hitler played by Waititi, and Waititi's performance perfectly fits what Hitler might look like from a child's eyes. Jojo Rabbit has a very unique way of confronting fascism, and while it doesn't ignore the serious implications, it finds humor in non-traditional ways a child would have to grow up when living in such a dark time. 10. The Meyerowitz Stories, new and selected. The Meyerowitz Stories. There are few directors who are able to depict family dysfunction with the poignancy of Noah Baumbach, and the Meyerowitz Stories find solace in the fact that children born into chaotic households are never fully able to grow past their upbringing. As their father Harold, Dustin Hoffman, prepares to showcase his work at a presentation, adult children Danny, Adam Sandler, Matthew, Ben Stiller, and Jean, Elizabeth Marvel, are forced to reckon with the ways in which their father's methods of raising them has continuously forced them to be in competition and conflict with one another. While Adam Sandler's routine as an immature, put-upon loser often grows stale in the films he's creatively involved with, he puts a new spin on the character in Baumbach's story and does some of the best work of his career as a well-meaning guy looking for acceptance. With great chemistry between the entire ensemble, the Meyerowitz Stories finds the humor in watching adults act like children, but is able to justify these actions with well-established relationships. 9. Game Night. While most major studio comedies have fallen into generic trends, Game Night proved to be an exception with its surprisingly nuanced direction, clever premise, and memorable side characters. Following a game night between adult friends that turns into an actual kidnapping mystery, Game Night is visually designed to look like pieces on a board, and the pop culture references all fit within the context of a trivial-obsessed couple. With some surprisingly gruesome violence and exciting chase sequences, including a great tracking shot reminiscent of Goodfellas, there's a lot of great craftsmanship here from directors John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein. Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams have fantastic chemistry and feel like an authentic couple looking to put energy back into their marriage, but the film's scene stealer is Jesse Plemons as the neighbor Gary, a cop suffering from a breakup who unexpectedly intrudes on the central characters when they're least expecting it. With a great soundtrack and script that keeps the viewer guessing, Game Night is a wonderful surprise. 8. Nebraska, 2013. Alexander Payne's hilarious road trip comedy gives Bruce Dern and Will Forte a chance to shine as an estranged father and son duo who take a trip down memory lane as they go to claim a clearly fraudulent prize of $1 million. Shot in beautiful black and white meant to reflect the sharing of memories between father and son, Nebraska is poignant in that the humor is blunt, coarse, and surprisingly sweet. Dern does a fantastic job at breaking down the rough exterior behind a grizzled, grumpy character with a fading memory, and Forte makes for an empathetic lead who begins to appreciate his father's life more as he recounts all the stories that he'd never heard before. Both characters are somewhat reluctant to share their feelings, but as the film goes on the viewers can become accustomed to their non-traditional ways of expressing affection. 7. Frances Ha Greta Gerwig brings an infectious sense of energy to the titular role in Noah Baumbach's Frances Ha, and her sensibilities are well matched for Baumbach's joyous celebration of everyday life. While many of his other films focus on characters that are downtrodden or depressed, Baumbach finds a much lighter side of things in Frances Ha through a lead character who finds the positive in the smallest aspects of her everyday life and takes joy in her freeness from responsibility and convention. Frances could be infuriating in her inability to plan anything, but the film is keen to show the detrimental side of her nature and how her non-compliance with structure can isolate her. Between spirited escapades in which Frances dances to David Bowie's Modern Love or painfully awkward dinner parties, Baumbach and Gerwig's first collaboration as writer and director serves as a great representation of their unique comedic talents. 6. Lady Bird. Greta Gerwig's directorial debut is one of the defining coming-of-age films of the decade, but it's also one of the funniest. Saoirse Ronan's character Christine, who proclaims herself as Lady Bird, is a whip-smart teenager wields her independence and sense of irony as shields against inevitable setbacks, and over the course of her tumultuous senior year of high school she learns the value of sincerity. Justine's self-confidence and affirmation often puts her into hilarious confrontations with others, particularly her perfectionist mother, played by Laurie Metcalf. While Christine's journey of maturation that results in her being more empathetic to those surrounding her is very emotional, Ronan handles each line delivery with a zany sense of wit, and Gerwig's script is able to subvert common coming-of-age story clichés in order to be much more profound. 5. The Grand Budapest Hotel. The Grand Budapest Hotel 2014 film still, photo credit, Fox Searchlight. Wes Anderson often frames his films with a storybook sense of synchronization, and The Grand Budapest Hotel is a film in which the entire story is one that's been passed along and retold through the eyes of different authors, thus explaining the zaniness and odd gaps in the narrative. As it is intended to be someone's recollection, the film is able to feel like a heightened version of something that actually happens. And while it is often mindful of the tragic passing of the old guard at the story's center, it never takes away from the compelling misadventures of Zero, Tony Revolori, and M. Gustav, Rolf Fiennes. With Gustav, Fiennes gives one of his finest performances to date as an indulgent, methodical embodiment of old-fashioned charisma, and Fiennes plays the character as nothing less than larger than life. Complete with Anderson's unparalleled visual style, including elaborate sets, sharp colors, and fast-paced movement, The Grand Budapest Hotel is his funniest and most meditative work to date. For Everybody Wants Some. Richard Linklater has always excelled at telling stories that come from a singular perspective of characters in a specific stage in life, and in this spiritual sequel to his 1993 classic Dazed and Confused, he explores the hyper-competitive nature of a college baseball team through the eyes of freshman Jackie Bradford, Blake Jenner. The film doesn't focus on any actual games, but rather shows how the week-long initiation process works before the first day of school, and how a group of highly competitive, hypermasculine guys play off each other and clash to prove themselves. The entire ensemble is filled with fantastic character actors, each of whom bring their own unique quirk into the fold, and the viewer is able to become exposed to this eclectic group as Jacques slowly learns to accept their traditions. It's a surprisingly earnest look on friendship with a terrific 80s soundtrack, and the meandering nature of the story is exactly what Linklater intended for this high-spirited hangout movie. 3. Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. Olivia Cooke. Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. Although there have been many films that have attempted to perfect the subgenre of cancer dramedy, Me and Earl and the Dying Girl turns into something more profound as it serves as a signature tribute to the love of cinema. Greg, Thomas Mann, and Earl, R.J. Solo, first turned to filmmaking because they're teenage outsiders that can't seem to fit in anywhere else, but as their friend Rachel, Olivia Cooke, begins to die, their confused feelings manifest into a unique form of catharsis. While its subject material is often depressing, the self-effacing and constant snark of Greg makes him a fitting narrator for the story, particularly as he satirizes conventions and generic plot points. With a unique visual design that often recreates moments in miniatures, there's a low-budget charm to the films that Greg and Earl make that translates to the film's actual craftsmanship. Etched in a morbid sense of humor and filled with clever references to iconic films, Me and Earl and the Dying Girl is the perfect dramedy for the cinephile crowd too. The Nice Guys and Nice Guys. Shane Black is among the cornerstone artists of buddy comedies, and The Nice Guys is a culmination of his best ideas about how two outsiders and weirdos could come to form a perfect comic pair. Ryan Gosling had already established himself as one of the best dramatic actors of his generation, but here he gets to do some truly outrageous physical comedy as he destroys any semblance of structure in whatever situation he's in, and Russell Crowe couldn't be a better straight man to play off of him. With a fun retro feel that plays off of all the sex, danger, and intrigue of 70s Los Angeles, The Nice Guys has a plot so convoluted that it's fun to see these incompetent detectives get wrapped up in it purely through accident. There's a comic approach to violence that is stark and blunt, and the film closes on an oddly melancholic note that reflects the futility of these characters' drive for justice. It's the perfect throwback that throws a wrench in the traditional nature of a buddy duo, with Gosling and Crowe giving performances for the ages. 1. The World's End. Edgar Wright has built a career off of subverting genre tropes, and the culmination of the Cornetto trilogy that included Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz is a perfect closure of this thematic trilogy about strained friendships. While the disaster film and body horror elements perfectly fit into a One Wild Night story where characters quickly lose track of their inhibitions, it's ultimately a story about the futility of reliving your youth and how nostalgia can be a crutch to deal with a sense of unfulfillment. As Gary King, Simon Pegg gives his best performance to date, and manages to find something infectiously entertaining in a character that is transparently self-obsessed and tragically childlike. King's full-on celebration of excess causes rifts within the group, and seeing this largely separated group of friends wrestle with their present and past identities makes for a lot of humorous scenarios. Wright goes deep on the world building and establishes an interesting metaphor for being trapped in a hometown full of memories that seem alien, and the film's ending represents a full commitment to its sci-fi premise. The most mature of Wright's films, The World's End is a breathless comic adventure that doesn't skimp out on any of the potential in drunk escapades, but finds a potent message of looking to the future. Please save trees and nature. Please subscribe my channel. Thank you. The 25 best comedy movies of the 2010s. The very nature of what defines a comedy film has changed in the last